All right, folks. Hello. We are officially live for our September League of Women Voters unit meeting. We are so excited to have you all here virtually via your homes. You may be following us on Facebook or on YouTube, and we are so excited to have you here. My name is Kate Ham, and I'm the Virtual Advocacy Director on the Board of Directors here at League of Women Voters, Wichita Metro. I'm really excited to host with you tonight Chief Gorden Ramsay of the Wichita Police Department. He will be speaking on how police are trained to use force, new policies that might be in place about the force, the review board, CIT training, police, and the relationship with the community. I'm really excited for this awesome conversation to have with such a wonderful expert. But first, we're going to talk tonight about some diversity, equity, and inclusion activities that we want to make sure that so that everyone feels included and ready here in our chapter, in our league. So with that, I'm going to bring on Joan Warren, one of our diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. Please welcome Joan Warren. Hi, Joan. Welcome to our unit meeting.
Thank you, Kate. Have you started seeing more and more email signatures with gender identity pronouns, such as he, him, his, or she, her, hers? Or have you been to meetings where the moderator says, please introduce yourself and include your personal pronouns or gender identity pronouns? This is the subject of our 5-minute diversity, equity, and inclusion moment tonight. DEI is a major force driving the League of Women Voters and hopefully the world. With that said, let's start our program tonight with a short video on gender-neutral pronouns and gender identities. Let's watch this short video to give you a better idea, and then we'll talk a little more after the video. Go ahead, Kate.
All right, folks, here we go. A romaine and kale salad with avocado, cucumber, shishito peppers, and 4 kinds of cheese, sprinkled in balsamic straight from Italy.
Wow! In my day, salads only had 2 ingredients: a rock-hard wedge of iceberg lettuce and a stinky old dried-up tomato.
Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to eat fast. Alex is stopping by in a few minutes to work on our robotics project.
Alex, is that the girl with that weird dog or the boy with the hat with the wings that flap?
No, Uncle Jay. This is Alex.
Oh, okay. I remember. A very nice young... come to think of it, well, is Alex a boy or a girl?
Actually, Alex doesn't define themselves as boy or girl.
What else is there?
Back in your day, most people understood the world in terms of just boys and girls. But now, we know gender is more complex than that.
Wait, aren't we just talking about whether you're born with a or a hee?
When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way, but the sex listed on your birth certificate may not necessarily match your gender identity.
Gender identity is a person's inner experience of who they are in terms of gender, their deep personal sense of being male, female, a blend of both, or neither.
And while many people have a gender identity that's the same as their assigned birth sex of female or male, that's not always the case, because gender exists on a spectrum. Like transgender, which means a person whose gender identity is not consistent with their assigned birth sex. Non-binary, which means a person whose identity doesn't fall in the category of either male or female. And genderqueer or gender fluid, which means a person who does not identify themselves as having a specific gender at all.
Does gender identity have to do with being straight or gay?
Actually, no. Gender identity has to do with the way you feel about yourself, while sexual orientation is based on the way you feel toward others, the people you may or may not be attracted to.
You know, I really like Alex, and I can tell they're a good friend to you. But I'm still pretty confused about all of this.
That's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone to respect them. To start, try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender, and use the name and pronouns that they ask you to. Above all, be a friend or ally for people of all gender identities.
That's right, Mom. Oh, Alex is here. Come on in.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, hey, Alex. Care for some salad? The balsamic's right from Italy, you know.
Joan, what a fantastic video.
Thank you. That came from amaze, AMAZE.org. And if you want to know more about gender identity pronouns, just Google that, gender identity pronouns, and there's a lot of information there. And of course, our group will be giving a lot more resources as the year goes on. A couple of hints include, when in doubt, refer to someone by their name rather than him or her. They, them, theirs is also one of the more common gender-neutral pronouns, and it's easy to incorporate into daily conversations. You saw that in the video. When I moved to Kansas, I spent a lot of time eliminating y'all from my diction, and guess what replaced that? You guys. Now that you guys is considered typically masculine, and so if you're addressing a meeting or starting a meeting, you'd say, hello, everyone, or hey, team. Times are changing. How to learn someone's pronouns. When you first meet someone, don't ask them about their pronouns. Instead, introduce yourselves like, hi, I'm Joan. My pronouns are she, her. That gives the person a chance to actually let you know. If they don't, that's okay, but you can ask them later in private. Don't put them on the spot. Ultimately, using gender-neutral pronouns doesn't require too much effort on your part, but it could make a huge difference to the other person and make them feel included, and you are providing a warmer, neutral environment. Thank you for watching our DEI moment.
Joan, thank you so much. I think each of us learned a really unique lesson today about how to become a person that's more inclusive, especially with our ever diverse and changing world. Thank you so much. I am so excited to introduce our next guest, Chief Gorden Ramsay, not to be confused with Chef Gordon Ramsay, but Chief Gorden Ramsay is our current Wichita Police Department Chief. He was appointed in January of 2016, so has been serving within the Wichita community for about 4.5 years. Before this, he worked in Duluth, Minnesota as an awesome police officer there and worked through several ranks in that department since 2006. As Wichita Police Chief, he has focused on building strong relationships with our community to lower crime and increase satisfaction with police. He wants to establish a successful citizen review board and initiated liaisons with disenfranchised communities to focus on building trust. Chief Ramsay has been recognized throughout many community organizations for his leadership, including the NAACP and the Greater Wichita Ministerial League. There is also many other committees that he serves on in ways that he's involved with our community. We are extremely excited to have him here tonight to learn more about how police officers are trained with force, different ways that they're reforming their police ideals and practices, as well as how they are connecting with our community on a daily basis. So let me introduce Chief Gorden Ramsay. I wish we had like a round of applause as you came in, but I'm not good with sound effects. So we are so excited to have you speak tonight and learn more about you. Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Thanks for having me, Kate. I appreciate the opportunity. And it is odd. It is a very odd year presenting to groups. I presented to a group of about 400 people online, and it was one of the most odd experiences I've ever had because you can't see people's faces. You can't see if they're laughing or scowling. So, but I guess that's what we have to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm. We'll get back to normal at some point, but I'm also excited to be able to reach new faces that we don't get to typically see in groups like this.
It's probably forever changed the way we interact.
Yes, yeah. That's for sure.
All right, well, I'll just get started then, Kate, if that's okay with, I'll kick it out with just talking about our use of force training and how we do things at Wichita Police Department. Awesome. Use of force is an area of particular interest and concern to me. Obviously, it's what makes the headlines. And I think from what I hear, that is where the community has the most concern when it comes to police issues, is how are we using force? And policing is very different than other areas in that we are, when you call 911, we're all you get. All you get is Wichita Police. You can't say, I'd like to have this police department or this police department or this. So we kind of have a monopoly on policing. So we have to make sure that we're listening to the community and doing everything we can to be the best police department possible. Now, with use of force training, it starts in our academy, and we have our academies are about 26 weeks long. We currently have a class of 54 officers going through the academy.
Wow.
We have our most women ever in the department, in the class. 17 women are in this class. Our last 3 classes have had the most women each time, and we keep raising it with each class. So it's great.
So
And
cool.
yeah, so and the national average, believe it or not, for women in policing is about 12%.
Yeah.
And then we just surpassed that with this class where we're up over that 12%. We're over the national average. Now, I can tell you that women police officers generally use less force than their male counterparts when we look at national studies and statistics. So I want to get as many women in the door as we can. One of the problems that we have, though, is during the childbearing years, we lose a number of our women. So in their late 20s into their 30s, we see women have children and then leave the department. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is figure out how we can increase our retention, whether it's job sharing opportunities, extended leave. But we've got to figure that out, because that's the key time frame where we lose a lot of our women officers. The other thing in the academy, police academies have been traditionally paramilitary. Some of police academies don't allow people to brush their teeth for so long. It's kind of a military. We've been trying to get away from that, because we know that with today's generation and women, if you can't brush your teeth, it just doesn't go over very well. So we're trying to get more in line with a business model versus a paramilitary model, with the idea of being able to keep our retention and recruit officers. But in that academy, that's 26 weeks long, a substantial portion of it is dedicated to the use of force. And officers are guided by what's called the Use of Force Continuum. That is, it starts with the least amount of force. There is just the presence of a police officer in a direct order, right? And from there, it goes up to verbal commands, hands-on, potential less lethal tools such as a taser. We have a new tool coming in called a bolo wrap. I don't know if anybody's heard about that, but it's kind of a funny tool. But when I first got into policing in 1993, I would have thought by today we would have a tool that could successfully incapacitate someone without killing them, right? Here we are 27 years later, and we really don't have that. But this bolo wrap shoots out kind of 2 prongs, and it literally wraps the person up on a wire. And one goes low and one goes high. So the idea is you get the upper body and the legs. We bought 8 of those. We're finishing up the policy, and we're going to be deploying those in the next couple of months. It's not for someone who is in a small room. You've got to have, because these things come out and when they wrap someone up. But it's we have to continue to look at different technology to help us with using the least amount of force necessary. So we have the bolo wrap on that use of force continuum, and then it goes up to strikes, hand strikes, different holds to hold someone. Choke holds are not allowed. They have never been taught here. They've never been allowed here, unless it's a life or death kind of a struggle. And I can tell you that one time I was in the life and death struggle. I was probably 2001, 2002, and I was fighting with a guy alone, and this guy wanted to kill me. And so I did get him in a hold until other officers got there to help me. But if I didn't hold him there, I was going to get severely hurt or even killed. So there is that one exception to the no hold rule, no chokehold rule, and that's a life or death. And then it goes up to force that is more likely to potentially cause harm up into ending at deadly force. So officers kind of use this continuum to gauge and judge on how much force should be used and what should be applied. The priority really, though, is not to get to keep officers safe and the community safe so that no one gets hurt. That is our goal. We focus on, in our training program, we focus on communication skills, crisis intervention training. The mental health issues that we deal with today in policing are greater than ever before. In early 90s, the state of Kansas closed down all their state hospitals. Mental health beds were there. I think there were several thousand. Today, there's less than 100. So this over-reliance on mental health has been pushed on police. And so that we are dealing more and more with very volatile situations that in past decades, we didn't have to deal with. But as a police organization, we recognize that, we are a life-saving organization and that the priority of life, the sanctity of life is our number one, most important, right? That we are here to be a life-saving organization and keep people safe. That is kind of the tenet of our use of force as well as de-escalation. We don't rush into situations and create a crisis, right? We've been teaching our officers to use time, distance, and communication as a way of keeping things calm. But it is a very difficult job. The situations that our officers are called to oftentimes are unimaginable and very, very tense and difficult to deal with. We oftentimes do expect our officers to be perfect. And the reality is that while we do a very thorough vetting process to get our officers to make sure we get the best and brightest, they're still human beings. And like the rest of us, they make mistakes too. Sometimes they misread things. Sometimes they are emotional and act on that emotion. And the thing that we struggle with today is that what do we do when an officer is well-intended but makes a mistake? That's very tough. The other thing that is very tough in policing right now, oops, sorry, that's my dog's toy. And that's embarrassing. Anyhow, and so when I lost my train of thought thanks to that toy squeaking, but it is a tough job. And when the officer that is well-intended and makes a wrong decision, how do we react, right? Well, we try to do all the vetting, all the training, all the psychological testing to get the best in the door. What happens when they do make that mistake? And with the focus on policing, when an officer now, when there's a use of force that's controversial anywhere in the country, it is national news. So you can see it online, you can see it on social media over and over and over. And that's the reality. When I stop at police calls, not only do our officers all have body cameras, but frequently there is 4 or 5 people videoing it around them as well. So we oftentimes for outdoor situations, we almost have a 360-degree view with everybody's cameras and the officer's cameras. The body cameras have been very helpful for us to judge on complaints. So when someone has a complaint, we will allow them to come in and watch the video as long as it's not an active case. We'll talk about it, and I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times when people see the videos, they will say they oftentimes were under influence or very emotional and didn't realize how they were acting. Most of the time, they say they pass without making a complaint. The cameras are very, very helpful for us. And they've been, I think they're good for everybody. Officers, it makes them more aware of how they're behaving, how they're acting. One of the other areas that I wanted to hit on real quick with the use of force training is the duty to intervene. A lot of the George Floyd issues, the recommendations or the community concerns that came out of his death involve, key issues such as the duty to intervene. Why did these other officers not jump in there? We've been working and pushing our officers and training our officers on that philosophy since 2017. Everybody had been trained on it prior to this incident, right? So the duty to intervene is very important to us as an organization. And the one thing that happened this summer is that we codified it, right? So we've been training on it and saying this is what we want you to do. But it pushed us to the next level where now it is in policy if an officer doesn't intervene when they are supposed to, there's a discipline matrix where it falls on the so everybody knows the expectations. Along those lines are, the opportunities to use weapons other than, lethal weapons like the gun. We have invested in the BOLO wrap. We've invested in tasers for our officers, less than lethal foam rounds that officers can use rather than deploying a firearm. They have an option that can knock someone down but not be a lethal use of force. We have we just ordered 50 more of those because for many years the officers only had a firearm or taser, and we're trying to expand our options for them when someone does when the time does call for that other force. I'll talk a little bit about the defunding issue, right? Defunding in policing. A lot of people asking about that. Well, what does that mean to me? What does it mean in general? For me, so I think it is a divisive term, right? For me, it's kind of, I'm passionate about the role police play in society, right? I have seen for 27 years the good that police do in our communities. And I have seen bad things, but it's a fraction of the good. But the defunding means that I talked about these mental health issues, this overburden, over-reliance on police for dealing with mental health issues. As the state cut their mental health beds and funding for other services were cut, more and more of our social ills fall on police. And many times police aren't the best to deal with it. So the theory behind defunding the police among many groups, not all, is that money should be taken from the police budget to go to social workers, et cetera, for mental health cases. Now, I get that we need funding for the social workers, mental health workers, but I don't think it should come at the cost of the police department. For years, it was a state mandate that the state was responsible for it, the county was responsible for it, and that burden has been pushed onto the municipalities now, and cities do not have the infrastructure to deal with the mental health issues. Nor do I think it's fair, because a lot of our mental health issues have a tendency to be more of a problem in urban areas, right? So someone, if they are suffering from mental illness and they're homeless, they go to places where there are services, and that is Wichita in a good portion of Kansas. So we get a lot of individuals that are suffering from mental illness, chemical abuse, homeless, that end up here because we have services for them. So that burden falls on us. And in many cases, I believe that it should be the state and county that's responsible for that, and it shouldn't come from the city. And traditionally it has been, until this summer when you hear a lot of people saying that it should be come from the city. The issues behind defunding, that is providing more mental health and treatment, have been saying that for 20 plus years, that we need more options for that are in need. How have we evolved to deal with the mental health issues? Well, we've trained all of our officers in crisis intervention training, or provided basic psychological mental health first aid training for them. So we have a benchmark that everybody gets. When I was trained in the early 90s, there was no psychological training, dealing with people in crisis. It was, try and talk your way through these things. And in many cases, what we did, we now know it was counterproductive. So now all of our officers are trained on the basics. We have partnered with DCF, where we have caseworkers that assist with families with mental health issues. We have partnered with EMS and ComCare, where we have a team that goes out 40 hours a week. It's called ICT1, a mobile crisis response team. And they have worked on our high utilizers. That is individuals that have been suffering from mental health issues or in crisis. And they work to get the individual stabilized. Mental health calls take a lot more time in policing for us to answer and work through. So this team has time to work on it. And they have expertise. And between the mental health worker and the EMS and the officer, they are diverting a lot of people from the emergency room.
Wow.
And so emergency rooms have been an issue because that's where we drop them off. If not the emergency room, when people talk about criminalizing mental health, oftentimes it's the jail, right? About 35% the sheriff will tell you of his inmates suffer from mental illness, and that shouldn't be. So the whole mental health care system needs funding, but right now a lot of it's falling on the backs of our police officers. And what keeps me up at night is when if someone that is in crisis, suffering from mental illness, is hurt at the hands of our officers because of the volatility of those calls. The other big issue was the no-knock warrants. You know, people, the Breonna Taylor case was actually, that was a knock and announce. Whether they announced is some, you know, there's a question of whether or not they announced they were police. But we have very strict guidance on how we handle our no-knock warrants. As a matter of fact, they have to be approved by the district attorney and me. And they're really limited for very severe cases, very rare cases, kidnappings, other cases where, you know, we don't have any choices. We didn't want to put a total ban on it, but it is highly, highly regulated by the chief prosecutor in the county and the chief of police. So that's kind of my spiel. I don't know how we're doing for time. I'd be happy to.
We're doing great. We're doing great on time.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to share?
Or?
Yeah, I think this is a great time for questions. So
Okay.
anybody that is watching, feel free to, go ahead and comment with any questions. We'll be able to pull them up on the screen. But to start off, I just have some questions for you. So, you answered so many really great questions. Even my dad commented on saying that he was very enlightened. So I appreciate that my dad is watching. So he'll be happy about that shout out there. But I've really enjoyed getting to learn how you all are responding. I have several friends that are in the Wichita Police Department and have gotten to learn from their perspective, but it's always great to hear from all the different sides on how people are handling things. One thing that I think is on top of everybody's mind is when you recruit, how do you recruit good officers? How do you kind of go through that process? What are you looking for? What are red flags? Tell me more about that process there.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, in the PD's budget is very lean, like the city's budget. And when you compare us to our other cities, Omaha, Tulsa, which are our most comparables, they have about 200 more police officers than us. So Omaha's crime rate is a little lower. Tulsa's crime rate is a little higher. Omaha's a little bigger. Tulsa's about the same size. But we are a very lean organization. In the mid-teens, 2015 or so, we had pretty much stopped recruiting. We had about 420 applicants in 2015.
Wow.
Last year we had over 1,200. And how we're doing that is we put the dream team recruiting team together, right? We've got officers that have made connections with colleges and universities, with military, and they have been laser focused on getting the best candidates. So not only have we got the most women, this class also has the most people of color. It's 60-some% people of color in it, and it's the highest we've ever had in the department. And the credit goes to our recruiters. They are like college football recruiters, where they find out who the best candidates are and get to know them, and are laser focused on getting the people we want. Now, so there's an application process. After the application process, if they meet the criteria, and about almost 75% of our police officers in Wichita have a 4-year degree.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the highest. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that. Probably one of the highest education levels of bigger cities in the country. And that started with Chief Lemunion back in the late 70s, early 80s, where he put a real big focus on education. And so that's been one of the complaints out of the summer's unrest, is that, police aren't educated. Now, the rest of the state is not nearly that high. But in Wichita, it is high. And I think a lot of it has to do with compensation, right? So you want the best, brightest education, you got to pay well. And our officers start for pay in the mid to upper 40s and top out probably around mid to upper 60s. So, but once they apply, they go through They have a physical fitness test. And one of the things we found, by the way, is that when I got here, we were failing a lot of women. There was an upper body strength test that was really, I felt was out of whack. So we adjusted it. And guess what? As a result, we've seen more women pass the test, right? And it was unfortunate that it went on that long because it really, I think, impacted our ability to continue to grow our number of women in the department. They have the physical fitness, they have aptitude testing, and then they have interviews with community members. We have several community panels where we have diverse members representing various races, backgrounds that judge these people. And I always tell them, I said, judge them and rank them on, if you were ever in crisis, how you would want them to respond if you had an emergency. So if they pass that, then they go to further testing. They take a polygraph test and then extensive day-long psychological testing using the MMPI, interview with a psychologist. If they pass that, they go to one more set of interviews. Then we do extensive background where we send out an officer to talk to their neighbors, talk to their ex-boyfriend, girlfriends, ask if there is anybody that would talk poorly about them, find those people. We're trying to dig up as much as we can to find out their character, who they are, etc. So then when they pass that, then they make it to the final panel, which is the department leadership, where they go through an interview process. And if they pass that, they get hired.
Wow.
But
I feel like you guys are really good at Facebook stalking. Like I just really feel like you guys, if you need a Facebook stalker on your team, I'm there. But man, that is some rigorous testing. That's awesome.
Yeah. And the other thing we do is there's now a company that they will screen social media to see if there's any red flags are inappropriate.
Ooh.
So yeah, because, every once in a while you hear, I just read about a couple officers in Texas that had posted some inappropriate comments, and it hurts our entire profession. The one thing you got to remember about policing is that it's unlike teaching or pick your profession, that when one officer makes a mistake these days, it taints the whole force. And I think that's one of the tough things for our officers this year, those guys and gals that are going out there every day and providing an excellent service, ethical, caring, compassionate, and then to see the profession demonized by the actions of some I think it's been a big part of morale buster this year for our officers.
No, I can imagine. I'm an optometrist here in town, and when you have one person that just does bad things, it's nice to have our individual offices, but you have one person do something kind of bad in town, and everybody kind of gets a bad rap. And yours is just on a larger scale right now, and that's definitely difficult. Well, we had some really great questions pop in, so I'm going to pop some up. This first one seems short, but she gave some clarification afterwards. So she wanted to know more about the Community Oversight Committee. Thank you, Susie, so much for commenting. Tell us more. She wanted to know, is there one? How does it work? What's that look like?
Yeah, so it's a civilian review board. It is made up of, I think there's 11 to 13 members. It is a group of diverse citizens. I think there's 4 African Americans, 2 or 3 Hispanics, women, men, right? So it's very representative of the people that we serve. They meet once a month. They get to see all the complaints that came in on the police department. They can pick out ones that they want to learn more about, and they can delve right in and dissect everything about the complaint. They can watch all the videos. They can see all the records, with the exception of the name of the officer. That's the one thing they can't see. But we will tell them the history of the officer, the discipline history, etc. And so they get a poke, prod, pull back every layer that they want. And there's really nothing they can't see other than the name. And this is the second one I did. In my previous job, we started a civilian review board. And I think it's good government when you allow people to come in and see your inner workings. So they meet, we've been meeting at City Hall. It's live streamed, their meetings, with the exception of when we do review those specific cases. It's closed session, so only they see the intricate details. But you'll hear a lot of people say, well, we need a review board with subpoena power. And the one thing to keep in mind about subpoena power is it's when you want to see something or interview something. So they can see everything they want, but the interviewing part doesn't happen, right? So that's the one thing that doesn't come with subpoena power. And because we are a labor environment and use a contract, it would require contract negotiations. And you know what? I think we're giving the board everything that they want to see and giving them the information they want to. So I don't know how strongly that a board would feel that they need that. But it's kind of growing I hear it mentioned more often. But I think if you have an open board that gets to see everything, I don't know if it's as critical as a lot of people say.
That's awesome. Where can people see the live stream when they are available? Is it on the website? Is it through Facebook? Where could they find that?
Yeah, so if you go to the city's website, there's information on the meeting times and locations, as well as how to see it, how to watch it.
Awesome. And I think we've got some interested parties on here. That seems really cool. So I have another person, and this might be just a good segue and might just kind of give people more understanding. So Sherry's asking, invest allegations of excessive force. When do you go to outside investigation? How does that work within the department?
Yeah. One of the things that early on when I came to Wichita, it was clear there was concerns about when we investigated ourselves criminally, right? So if an officer is accused of excessive force, we determine, well, could it be criminal or not? And we had a MOU, memorandum of understanding, with the sheriff, where if there's criminal behavior involved by one of our commissioned staff, I will investigate his and he'll investigate ours. So anytime there is a criminal allegation, it goes outside of our PD to another entity. They do all the investigations. They send it on to they send it on to the district attorney. So I think that's worked out well. It takes away the concerns of, hey, these are your friends, you're trying to, brother-in-law them or whatever. And I feel better with it because I'll tell you, we want to get these things right. We want people to trust us. But the fact now that it's out of my hands, I don't have to worry about anything getting screwed up because it's not on us. I think that's a good practice, and I think more and more agencies are moving toward that. So as far as the criminal aspect is, it goes to another agency. If it's just a complaint, a rudeness complaint, or minor stuff that doesn't rise to the criminal level, we have an internal affairs unit that investigates it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's the information the review board gets to see, those complaints that come through the internal affairs.
Oh, that's super. This is so interesting to learn so much more, because I think sometimes we assume because we just do. We're humans and naturally. And so I think this is so cool. Some other questions is, how can the community be more involved with helping development with the policing policy? Is there community opportunities to comment, or how can we help in that aspect?
Yeah. So several different ways. One is through the Civilian Review Board. That's one of their charges, is to review our practices and policies and provide input for them. The other one is, on certain policies that are a little more controversial, we will put policies out to the public and ask for feedback. Like, for instance, when we started our cameras in downtown and Old Town, when we wrote our policy, we asked people to provide input on how they were used. And we put the draft of the policy out and asked for people's thoughts and concerns. And we've done that with a couple other policies as well that really rise to that level of community concern or interest. So every so often you will see a policy that comes out and we seek people's feedback and input.
That's awesome. I think that's a really great way for us to be able to see, to know that when there is something that's going to impact us as a community, that you guys are really there and really working and really willing to ask our opinion. Mm-hmm. There's so many good questions on here. Literally is there's so many. This is really good. So so this is another kind of, so what could we do as like League of Women Voters to encourage community involvement in high crime areas? So places where there might be more crime, but how can the community get involved to help decrease those crime rates, or just kind of get involved in those areas to show support for you all and different things of that nature?
Well, I appreciate that question. You know, all the summer's unrest with police, really, and I've said this for many, many years, police are the flashpoint for societal problems, right? You'll have one really bad police incident, and it's a culmination of a lot of issues, and it explodes, right? We have a lot of disparities in our country. When you look at African-American disparities, criminal justice and policing is one, but you look at medical, right? Did you know that the misdiagnosis for dementia in senior African-American males is terribly low, right? They're misdiagnosed all the time. So
I mean, yeah, pain management, lots of things. I'm right there with you.
Housing is another one. Education is another one. Employment is another one. I mean, there's about 13 core areas where these disparities feed into, cause problems that often get people in the criminal justice system, right? So from my perspective, if I want to solve one of our biggest relation issues, one is police have to be part of the solution. So you'll hear me frequently talking about the need to keep kids in school, because we know that if a kid can read at grade level by third or fourth grade, their chances of graduating are much higher. Their income opportunities are much better. College chances of getting in trouble with the law go way down. So we have our officers reading to kids in the schools as a way to spur interest in reading, because we know that down the road we'll get payback for that.
Yeah.
But the disparities issue really is what has fed into a lot of the unrest, because it's not all about police. And while the George Floyd incident was horrific, the Breonna Taylor incident was horrific, we got to look at, what's feeding a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it is systematic disparities, and it's not all police issues. And I wish we could move the conversation to how can we get more equity for those that have historically had these issues with disparate treatment throughout the system.
No, definitely. And I think that's a great conversation to have. I know I've been having it more within myself and within my communities of reading really good books of how do I go in and be able to fix these disparities that that I didn't realize I was a part of, or that I have unknowingly forwarded, and things of that nature. So it's so good to hear as a community, all these different aspects are coming in to see, all right, how can we make these things better? How can we increase and improve our communities in this way? I have a very long question, so be prepared.
Okay.
It says, we hear about, this is from Martha Pint, one of our co-presidents. We hear about how officers are often tasked with being social workers, offering mental health services, kind of everything that you've talked about. What kind of mental health services are you offering to officers who are tasked with serving these communities? Because when you do work with people with severe mental health issues, it is an impactful experience. And so kind of how are you helping them to make sure that they are having a safe and a productive life outside of their, daily kind of job?
Well, that's a good question, because officer wellness is a growing focus and area of concern. If I was to import the terrible scenes of trauma and child abuse and death into this screen right now for people to see, they'd be appalled, right? We now know that continual trauma and significant calls that these guys and gals go on does have an impact. And, I've seen it throughout my career. An officer that has worked the street for 25, 30 years, you can see that they have a little more cynical view of the world. They're a little sharper. They're a little more antisocial. And that's one of the ways that these terrible calls impact officers, right? So one of the things that we have been working on in our wellness program is, one, we're trying to fund an app for officers so they can have resources available if they are feeling depressed. Yeah, the number one killer of cops is actually suicide. And so, I want to make sure we're doing our part to keep our officers healthy. So in this app is all kinds of resources, people they can call 24 hours a day and get help, that understand the intricacies of public safety and that have a desire to keep our cops healthy and safe. The other thing that we have been encouraging them is to go for a checkup, a mental health checkup. Their insurance pays for them to go up to 5 times a year for a mental health checkup.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we've been talking about even mandating that they go for at least an hour once a year to get a checkup and a tune-up from a psychologist.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we've been discussing. But, when I started in policing, it was the way they would debrief back then was on their Friday, they would go out and drink as a group together. Fortunately, we've evolved now where our cops are much more family-oriented. And on their Fridays, they want to go home and be with their families.
Yeah.
The incidents of alcoholism and divorce have really changed in my time as a police officer, where we just don't see that as much as we used to.
That's awesome.
We
That's
talk
really
about it much more.
No,
Yeah.
I think this is all fantastic. I think as a world, we are learning more about mental health and our experiences, how they impact us. How often do you have an experience and and I can relate in a medical way when I see a medical experience that is horrific, that you just kind of are like, oh, that's part of the job and move on. And then you realize a couple of days later, like, whoa, you kind of have an experience and kind of realize where some of your behaviors might come from. I'm so excited because also that's an awesome recruiting tool to say, hey, look at how good your insurance is. It's covering all these sessions. That's so good. So we have a lot of good, because not everybody's insurance does. We have a lot of really some other good questions. This one is from one of our communication instructors. It sounds like whatever we can do to eliminate systemic disparities could help in arrest. And so there's some more things. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of touch on there? I thought that was just a really awesome point that we were working through.
Well, I think it's important for people to recognize that we as an organization want to be part of the solution, right? We know how communities of color feel in many cases about the police, and we work very hard to build relationships. But until we can fix the bigger issues, that is the educational opportunities and that list that I mentioned, we're going to continue to have problems. We're going to have continuing problems. And one thing that I didn't mention on the use of force issue is we talk about de-escalation, but one of the things that we've seen over the years is, especially now during heightened awareness, is that we do have some people that manipulate situations. While the police go in wanting to de-escalate, we have some that want to escalate it, right? The people, not cops, but the people we're dealing with. And if you ever or have a loved one that's concerned about interaction with the police, what we tell them is do what the police officer asks at the time. Right. And if you have a complaint about it, whether you thought something was unfair or you were stopped unjustly, we can address that after the fact. And I want to know about it if someone's feeling that way. But at the time when you're being told, officers giving you direction, that's not the time to have the argument. There may be other things going on that people don't realize, but the time to review it is after the incident and not during it. We have these cameras now that we can review. And that's where a lot of our flashpoints are, is when we have people that are not doing what they're told, right? And they feel, maybe rightfully or not, they feel that they were treated poorly or being treated poorly or being picked on. But the time to talk about it is after the fact, and we can review it. And we do take those complaints seriously.
That's awesome. So I have another question about recruitment again. How do you encourage and recruit Black and brown men and women to become police officers? I know we talked a little bit about that recruiting process, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, one is we need people, I've got 2 women as deputy chiefs, right? I got 3 deputy chiefs. One has just left. She's now the chief in Abilene. But I have women in leadership positions. One of the women is African American. The male deputy chief is Hispanic, the first ever Hispanic deputy chief in the department. So we need people in leadership positions that represent our community and that understand the difficulties, the intricate difficulties with entering police force. Like, I can tell you that our the female deputy chief, African American, some of her family members quit talking to her when she became a police officer. So she can help those that are entering that may have those concerns because she can relate. The captain of our training academy and the recruiting, really the guy in charge of recruiting, is African American, Lem Moore. And he gets the importance of outreach. We have a recruiting team that is very diverse. Those are the key areas that we're doing it, is the people out there that are doing the recruiting look like the people we want to recruit. Right? We want to be reflective of our community, and we're not there yet. We're making great strides, but people want to see people that look like them when they're police officers, right? Growing up, that's all I saw was white cops, and so I couldn't imagine being Hispanic or Black and saying, "Jesus, are there anybody that looks like me in this profession?" Some of them probably don't even consider it because they don't see that. So that is a significant area of our focus, and that I appreciate that question.
No, I think that the way you stated it is you've got to have role models in those situations to have that really good, to really be able to connect and feel like you can be a part of that you are a part of that program in the department, and as well as just you can feel like your community, that they are a part of your community as well. When nobody looks like the community as well, the community doesn't feel as a part of the department. But when we're all working together to be more integrated, not just in all parts of our world and society, as we've kind of covered tonight, but as well as especially within, places where there's more interactions and more communications, I think it just really brings about just so much community empowerment and passion too. That is a piece that the community is more accountable for each other. They feel like they are just heard and listened, as well as you guys feel, the department feels heard and listened. And that's so important. As a community, it's all about working together. As my mom would say, is like, you've got to, you've always got to work together. More minds are better minds. So I'm just so excited. This is so cool to hear. And there are so many people on here saying the exact same thing, that we're just learning how much Wichita is doing really good work for so much longer than than a lot of these things have come up. And that's so awesome.
Kate, one quick thing too on the I just lost my train of thought. The anger toward police, right? So you call 911. If I ever call 911 or my family member ever calls 911, we all want the best and brightest, most capable, ethical people to show up. And one of my worries in recent months is with all the anti-police rhetoric and police bashing, is that we're losing good candidates that maybe want to become a police officer, but not right now because there's just too much anti-police. And we need to encourage as a community the best and brightest people to come into this profession. And because if we don't, you don't want the bottom of the barrel responding to your 911 call, right? And so please keep that in mind. While we have these frustrating national incidents or incidents that occur with police, we still have to encourage good people to come into this profession.
The way that we're going to, in all professions, but especially within that policing area, if we want things to get better, we have to encourage better with it. We have to encourage better people to do it as well. It can't just be, well, take what you got and just deal, like whatever you can get, just kind of figure out. But when you can find a good person, you can train them to do anything, because they're going to be able to come to things with a good mindset. And I think that's so important. I want to I have a couple more questions for you. I think we've got time for 1 to 2 more. I have a person that is looking at, like Martha again, is crime prevention versus law enforcement. Is it more lopsided, or like how are you shifting things? Talk about more on how that kind of works for you all.
Yeah, I love that question because it is a big part of what we do. For me, I am all about community policing. That is at my heart and soul. I want our officers engaging the public in positive situations as much as possible. But the reality is when they're responding to calls all the time, they don't have that opportunity to stop and chat, to have that contact when there's not a crisis. In 2016, we did a staffing study, and it looked at the data around how busy are our cops. And what we found is that you want your police officers to never be on calls more than 60% of the time. If they start creeping upwards of 60% of the time, that means their proactivity is hurt to nothing, and their ability to engage the community in positive ways, shoot some balls with kids, stop and talk to the kids, stop and talk to people on their porch. That doesn't happen. And we're in that reactive mode. And what we found in our study was that pretty much from 11 a.m. to 9:10 p.m., our officers are going nonstop during those times. That we're over that 60% range, sometimes 70%, which gets into dangerous. That there's certain times where we don't always calls. Important calls may take someone across the city to go to because there's no one else available. So they are busy, and it's concerning because it hurts our ability to be proactive and build those relationships. The other thing that's important is that I can tell you, I like to go out on the street and keep my fingers on the pulse and interact. I still like to go out and answer calls and help people. And I can tell you, a year ago, I went on a call, burglary, Friday afternoon. The late woman comes home from work. Someone had broken into her house. So I think it was about 4 o'clock when she called. We were sent the call about 7 o'clock. So several hours she waited for the police to respond. When we got there, who do you think she was mad at? She was no longer mad at the burglar. She was mad at the cop because we didn't care, which couldn't be farther from the truth. It's just that our calls are prioritized on, safety, personal safety, fights, domestics get a priority. Life is the priority, and then it goes down the line. Property crimes, when the suspect's gone, is kind of at the bottom. So it took us about 15 minutes to, make friends with her again after that and explain to her, because she was hurt that it took us so long to get there. And the only reason is that we were just very busy. And it wasn't that the guys were, screwing off at Quick Trip. It was they were all on significant calls. So that is it.
That is really interesting to learn more, because there's so many different components that we're learning about your job and how all these things work. I think we have time for one more question, and I want to get this one in before time's to wrap up. This one was an interesting one, and I think it'll be kind of a good topic for us to kind of end on, is what are the penalties for false reporting by officers? Are there tremendous I know we talked about this a little bit, and kind of talk a little bit more about how you guys are handling this. I know we had a little bit of a little snippet of it, but tell us a little bit more. Right.
Well, so it's no different than any other profession, right? People you work with, you develop relationships with and become, so there is always that concern that there may be, someone may not report everything. But here in police business, if an officer lies, they're fired, right? So if an officer lies, there is no gray area there. I say, if you mess up, you fess up. If you lie, you die. And I tell all the new recruits that, our officers know that. So there is that portion. There also is that duty to intervene portion that we now have in our policy, whereas if an officer sees misconduct, whether it be use of force or something else, and they don't say anything, they're going to be severely disciplined up into including termination. I will tell you that between 40 to 50% of our complaints that we get on officers are generated internally. That is officers or staff telling other things on other officers. So a lot of people are shocked at that number, but yet 40 to 50%, sometimes upwards of 50%, those are internally generated complaints that this officer didn't do X, Y, Z.
Hey, it's kind of like when you've got a brother or sister and you say, Mom, they didn't. And you get to kind of get to say, no, they didn't do the dishes. No, I'm not going to get in trouble for this. They are the ones that didn't do the dishes.
Yeah.
Chief Ramsey, I have really enjoyed our conversation tonight. I feel like it opens up a lot of answers that a lot of people have had, as well as I think it'll give us a lot to think about and maybe even come up with more questions. What's a great way for people to get in touch with someone within the police department if they do have further questions?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because there's one opportunity that I want to take to tell everybody about the Citizens Police Academy.
Awesome. That's a really great way for us to kind of take in more understanding and just kind of, again, finding ways to connect with our community. I really appreciate you coming on tonight and spending after hours times with us, as I think it looks like it might be raining outside again. It's been off and on all day. I can't tell, but I just appreciate you taking some time out of your family and different things to be able to connect with us and share with us here at League of Women Voters. We really appreciate your time and are so thankful that you chose to spend it with us. So thank you so much.
I'd like to do it in person sometime, so give me another call in person where I'm not stepping on doggy squeaky toys.
You didn't see me. My cats decided they were going to try to jump up here, and they both got in trouble about it. So I am right there with you. So again, thank you so much. Everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to our unit meeting for the month of September. Again, it is going to be hosted on the 4th Monday of the month at 6:30 p.m. We are so excited that you have joined us and look forward to our next meeting, which will also be held virtually. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to have more questions and answers about this topic, don't hesitate to reach out to us at our League of Women Voters Wichita Metro Facebook page, or feel free to leave us a comment in our YouTube as well. We have really enjoyed getting to connect with all our members again and continue to look for opportunities to tune in and volunteer. I know that there were some questions about books and other questions that weren't answered this evening. We will try to go on and be able to review all of those so that you will have an answer before the evening's up. But if not, give us about 24 hours. If you do need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are so excited that you chose to spend your evening with us, and we look forward to chatting with you all soon. Make sure you're registered to vote, you've applied for your mail-in ballot, as well as you have recruited at least 3 to 5 of your friends to also have a voting plan in place. We're excited for this upcoming election. Make sure you have your calendars marked for November 3rd. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon.